Welcome, everyone. So excited to see so many faces here in the room. Thanks for joining us. My name is Gabi Duarte. I am with the global sales team at Travel Oregon. We're so excited to have you all here today. Today, we're going to be talking about how, despite the pandemic, our industry has actually been more innovative than ever. We know that things had changed, some things slowed down, but that doesn't mean that the industry wasn't hard at work at a number of incredibly innovative programs around the state. We have examples of work from folks leading the way in important initiatives around Oregon. Things like DEI work, sustainability, and key partnerships. So we're gonna get an opportunity to hear from those incredible folks here today. We're gonna let them introduce themselves, talk about their program a little bit, and I know you're gonna have questions, but I'm gonna ask you to write those down and save them for the end so we can do kind of a group Q&A. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Erica Sears with Oregon Coast Visitor Association.
Hi, everyone. Okay, here's the mic. How's it going? I'm Erica Sears, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. How many people do we have in here that are on the Oregon coast? Ayo, hey fam. So I'm actually going to start my talk off by sharing a moment, a memory that I've kept with me over the past 2 years of this pandemic. And as we're sitting here in person, we're not wearing masks, I feel like that's just a good way to start off my conversation, but also what everyone else is going to talk about today. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when the threats of lockdowns were happening and people weren't sure what was going on, something very unusual happened along the entire Oregon coast. A very coordinated, but no coordination at all. We had a campaign that happened along the coast. It doesn't have a name, but for the sake of today's presentation, I'm gonna call it, Please Don't Come Here. Please don't come here. In my hometown of Pacific City, we had a lot of homemade signs that said, please don't come here, also worded differently. On the North Coast, we actually had mayors evacuating visitors. It was an incredibly wild time, and that was a moment for me where I was like, wow, this is so real, because the people that were asking them to leave at their heartbeat are the ones that are inviting visitors to our destinations, that are crafting these incredible invitations to come and make these lifelong memories in our destinations. These communities that solely rely on tourism were saying, please don't come here. And I was just like, wow. But I get it, we all got it, right? They were trying to protect the public safety. We weren't sure what was going on. We had to protect our communities. And also, we weren't really able to provide a visitor experience. Things were shut down. We didn't know what was going on. And those same organizations and communities and businesses right away pivoted, I know, and they became the hubs of communication within their communities. They became the distribution centers of hand sanitizers and masks. They became experts on federal loans for businesses. They did fundraisers. They became takeout campaigners. And I consider all of them and all the coastal people, all of us in this room, to be incredibly successful because of that. And I think that the key to that success was remaining relevant to our communities and our visitors during this difficult and changing time. So good job, everyone. But just to build a little more context, a few other things that happened in the past 2 years. Of course, we had the historic wildfires of 2020. It even affected us on the Oregon coast, a region that usually doesn't see that type of activity. We had insane disruptions to supply chains and distribution, and of course, the economic impact of that halt to tourism. So when our Oregon Tourism Stakeholder Survey results came out, I don't think I should have been surprised that on the Oregon coast, our stakeholders ranked climate action as both a short-term and long-term priority in our region. And I think I was actually really surprised because it's something we don't talk about in tourism. It's not like a really fun icebreaker to start a conversation off with. We don't ask that question, but it was put on that Travel Oregon survey. And that was just this instant moment where we were like, wow, why aren't we talking about climate change? Should we be talking about climate change? At the same time, there was this international coalition happening called Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency, and that's destinations all over the world that were experiencing those same things: wildfires in Australia, supply chain disruptions, economic impact, and saying, how can we make tourism better, but how is climate change and our changing climate really impacting our destinations? And so they reached out to ACFA and they said, hey, we know you guys do some of this work. Would you be interested in joining this coalition? I was like, thanks, but no thanks. I am not a climate change expert. We don't have a lot of capacity on our team. My instant reaction was like, no, I don't know how we would do this. This seems a little overwhelming. But then when we started thinking about that, it's really the umbrella impact to all these other impacts we're seeing in our region. So we talked it over, and as an organization decided to go ahead and commit to being part of this coalition. So in the spring of last year, we officially declared a climate emergency for Oregon coast tourism, and we are committed to creating a 10-year climate action plan that will guide our organization and kind of show how we'll support our community partners. We were able to hire a climate scientist. We just had an article in Skift come out about that, and I just thought it was a thing that made sense because I'm not a climate scientist, so we're like, oh, we should hire someone that knows how to look at the science, and everyone's like, whoa, groundbreaking. I was like, yeah, yeah, that's why we did that. And so just to share briefly, I'm actually having a panel later on today where we're diving deeper into this topic. But the first thing we did is we started by interviewing different agencies, state and federal agencies. And so just to give you a few examples, that's like the Oregon Department of Transportation, who will be on the panel later today. They're one of the only Department of Transportations in the country that has a climate change office that's focusing on this, that has the resources for this. We also talked to Energy Trust of Oregon, Oregon Department of Energy, DEQ, all these different agencies to say, hey, what resources do you have for our stakeholders? What funding do you have for them? How can we just click in? I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so a few things that I've learned over the past 10 months. The first one is that we were the first tourism organization, business really, to start talking to them about this. And I was kind of hesitant. I thought these agencies were going to be like, what do you think you're doing here? Stay in your lane, tourism. And they were so excited to talk to us. And they had no idea what to do with us because they hadn't talked to tourism. And so, it's kind of an interesting process. But what concerns me is that as they're developing resources and grant programs, that eventually someday when it becomes maybe more of a stick versus a carrot, that no one's there representing tourism to say, hey, this is important to us too. But it would take us 5 years for restaurants to change from this practice to this practice. Or we would need this amount of money, this amount of technical expertise for us to do this in partnership with the state of Oregon. And so I feel like there's really this place of advocacy that we could be in. Another one that's like my unfavorable lesson learned is that climate action will look different for every single organization in this room. There is no cookie cutter template to doing this work because all of our destinations look and work so differently. So it's fun in that way, but it can also be a little bit challenging. So as I wrap up here, I would just say that the panel today is called Innovative Oregon, and from what I've seen and talking to these amazing partners here, that being innovative is often led by organizations that are willing to stay relevant to the needs of our communities, our natural resources, and our visitors. And Kieran earlier today in his morning talk mentioned that we had to be willing to change some of our metrics in order to remain relevant. And I think in that way, it leads us to innovative projects. So really excited to stand up here today with these innovative folks and to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the state of Oregon. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I said aha right in the microphone. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me in the room, my name is Danielle Tehema. I'm the Executive Director of the Willamette Valley Visitors Association. And I'm here to talk to you about the Unpacking Us initiatives and the DEI work that we're doing in the Valley. And I did not prepare for this because I had too much time. And it's a very difficult topic. And it's hard to roll everything into 10 minutes, but I'm going to do my best because we're donating time to Lizzie. Bob and I discussed this. So before I jump into some of what we're working on, and I have some of our partners in the room with me today, I want to acknowledge that anytime I speak on DEI work, I open it up to the understanding that it's a safe space. So what I say here today, and I will do my best not to cry, so nobody cry because I will cry with you for no reason. But this is a safe space. And in order to start this conversation, you need to know a little bit about who I am. So my pronouns are she, her. I have a non-binary child. I have a member in my family who's of the deaf community. My father has MS and has ableism issues. I'm also an enrolled tribal member. And speaking to one of our commissioners earlier today, I realized that giving a welcome to Sport Oregon in Independence about a month ago was the first time I had spoken my native language to a group of people in the state of Oregon. To me, that shows and that proves that we're making headway. But there's a long road ahead of us, and it is not a sprint. It is a really, really long marathon, like 100 years. So a couple things, again, not prepared. I tried to scribble out the questions that she told me to prepare for, but a summary of the program we're working on. So I came back to Oregon. I'm an Oregon native. Came back to Oregon July of 2019 with high hopes. My first time at the regional level. I've been at the DMO level. I was an Oregon State Heritage Commissioner for a while. I've been a small business owner. Been on the board for DMOs. First time at a region, I'm like, I'm going to make changes. But I realized that WAVA had no DEI statement, and we had some work to do. Great. I've done this in the past. I've worked for tribes, tribal entities. My background is in federal law, tribal law. I can do this. Start to make some connections. We started our contracting process with a DEI consultant, Clinton Street Consulting, late 2019. November 2019, we had those conversations. Paused everything for the holidays. Started to reignite a conversation early 2020. And then we all paused for 2 weeks. That turned into 2 years. But during that time, some other things impacted our state and our communities. And George Floyd's murder was one of them. And I wrote a letter, and my marketing team edited it down from like 2 pages to 1 paragraph, because they're like, you can't say that. But what it brought out in me was a lot of trauma for being a person of color. And I realized we needed to pick up this work now. We can't wait. So starting from opening up a Zoom line to whoever wanted to call in from our region and needed support, whether it was DEI, COVID, eventually wildfire, PR support, marketing support, shifting, sorry, I can't say the P word, Heather, shifting from one issue to another. Tori Middlestad, who's now in Grants Pass, and Katie McFall would jump on that Zoom line, and we'd have partners call in for any number of reasons. And we realized there was a need to have this communication. I'm good. So fast forward, we get a committee together. Our DMOs, our stakeholders, our key partnerships. Fast forward again, I start calling back on colleagues that I've had. Some are in this room. And I realized that it's a big struggle. I realized that I was getting overwhelmed because people were reaching out to me saying, I want you to sit on my board. I need a female. I need a person of color. And that's where we're checking the box. We talk about greenwashing. But tokenism, and that's a major problem also. So then we started talking internally. How do we unpack this? Because we all have our own baggage. I am no saint. I have my own unconscious biases that I myself have to continue to relearn. It's never ending, but I want this for my children, grandchildren, 7 generations to come. So we kept our committee together, and we ended up with 2 task forces, one that was focused on training, and one was focused on our employment, our workforce, our development, because we realized we can't just have this top-down approach. If you only train, which I'm grateful that Travel Oregon had trainings, but oftentimes it's only that C-level, that executive team. And then you're going back as an executive and saying, this is what I learned, do this. It doesn't work. So you have to have that bottom-up approach. You have to be in community. You have to be in the trenches. You have to understand what everyone's challenge is, which is a daunting and impossible task. So after about 1.5 years of talking, our amazing chairperson, Samara Phelps, who I think is in another session speaking right now, got together with our DEI consultant and our teams, and they decided they were going to do a listening tour. So rather than another survey, because we were all surveyed out at this point between wildfires and COVID and how to shift and where the money's coming from and how to keep people employed and supply chain issues, not going to do a survey. We're going to call people. We're going to commit to call at least 5 people, more if we could, and take a half hour of their time to answer 9 questions, which in all actuality it was 6, because one was, what's your name, where do you work, and can we call you again? So ask these 6 questions. And I was on the phone with some people for almost 2 hours. And these questions were, are you working on DEI initiatives? Do you see a lack? What are the challenges? What are you facing? And we took all of this feedback from this listening tour because it was important to connect on that level. We're humans. We needed that connection. And we came up with a top group of topics. But the common thread that we knew from a year before is that our frontline staff was in dire need of help and training and finding someone to talk to, because DEI is also typically not something that's in our budget. How do you support this work if you can't finance the work? How do you find someone to come in and facilitate? Because like Erica's saying, she's not a climate scientist, I am not a DEI consultant. So how do you fund this? How do you find this? And you reach out to partnerships. And I had a prior working relationship with the Transformational Travel Council, TTC for short, and they agreed to crowdfund. So we're working with them now. We're hoping to have our first 2 videos, but definitely 1 by Oregon 22. First video of 6, frontline staff asynchronous coursework. And that is the first for the tourism industry that we know of, because we have been asking, we have been researching. No one that we know of in the DMO or the industry space has asynchronous coursework that can be molded based on the individual organization, whether you're a small business of 3 or you have 300 or 1,200, or whether you're a federal organization or an independent government or a nonprofit. This work you can have, you can house, and you can revisit with the idea that we'll reconvene quarterly or semi-annually to talk through the challenges, to learn from each other, so that we can all get to a space where I can stand in front of a group of people, most I know, some are strangers, but not after today, and say, here's my challenges, here's me, here's who I am, here's what I hope, what are your challenges? And so when I open up those conversations, people come to me and say, I don't know if I should call you Indian, Native American, tribal, what are you? Those questions, I love those questions because that proves that we're getting somewhere. Having a tribal welcome this morning, we're getting somewhere. Acknowledging the differences in the room and how beautiful that we all are with those differences, we're getting somewhere, but the road is long. And we're not gonna stop. WAVA's continuing with, like I said, with these 6 videos, we're gonna look for continued support and continued funding to continue this asynchronous work, share it with our partners, share it with our DMOs. I'm grateful that my board supports me. See a couple of you in the room. They haven't kicked me back out of Oregon yet. But some of our partners are listed here. Again, there's so many that are passionate about this work and understand the need. Because when we're inclusive, it not only benefits us financially, but it's good for humanity. So I could stand up here and take 10 more hours, but I won't. I'm gifting a minute to Lizzie. I'm around the rest of the conference, happy to discuss this more, but thank you all.
Do I hit something?
Yep, arrow button. There we go.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know there's a session that's happening concurrently right now that really examines the use of the letter M in our RDMO and our DMO sessions, and I'd be there if I wasn't here. And I think what you're seeing here is what that looks like in practice. I don't think you're going to hear any of us talk about a marketing program, right? That's just not where our heads are when we talk about innovation. You know, and that comes up, and I'll talk about it a little bit more as I talk about the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network. My name is Bob Hackett. I'm the Executive Director of Travel Southern Oregon, which is the RDMO way down south. And it also includes, Douglas County, Josephine, Jackson, Klamath, and also Lake County. And so that the vastness of those different geographies from wine country over to the Heart Mountain Refuge is part of why I love the job. And that's sort of what I'm going to talk about a little bit. Many of you probably knew my friend Brad Niva, who had this role previously before he jetted out for Big Sky, Montana. And this is a project that I had started and Brad and I had worked on together, but that'll also come up later too. I want to share sort of what this is, why it is, all under the banner of innovation. I'm talking to you as if projects are going to come before you that are new or that you have in your head. And how do you do them, right? How do you decide how to do them if you think they're really worth following? And so when Jessica, first of all, who here's from Lake County out in the room? Brianna, yes. Lake County Chamber of Commerce head Brianna McLean, thank you. And so Jessica, who's sitting next to her, was previously the executive director of the Lake County Chamber out there. And so Jessica held with Alexa and Travel Oregon, a rural tourism studio in 2018 up at the Warner Canyon Ski Hill. Many of you Travel Oregon folks were there. Jessica was there. And at that point, there was no ODSN, right? So it didn't exist. Dark sky tourism was a note on a pad tucked in the far corner of the room, and I had written it there. But the Geologic Features Group, the Western Heritage, the Trail Committee groups that came out of that rural tourism studio all had just great energy. They needed to go, and there was no reason to get in the way of the work that was happening out of that studio. It did what it was supposed to do. But at some point during the rest of that meeting, Superintendent Barry Imler from the Fremont Forest came up to me and he said, I like that dark sky idea. And that was all I needed, just like bookmark it. Okay, because the superintendent of the National Forest likes the idea, all right? And I knew who to go to, and this is sort of mantra number one with these innovative projects. Know who your key partners will be and make a personal approach to them. Don't sell it the first time you talk to them, okay? Know who your partners are going to be and just have a conversation about it. Get some feedback. Be in a mode of inquiry for a long time before you start moving, okay? He created an opening that in rural Oregon, those of you who work out there, it's like gold. I mean, do we have any public land managers, public land staff here? Oh, thank you, okay? Because you guys, we need you guys. And so all of you need to make an effort to meet and have relationships with your public lands managers across the board in your region. And so when he did that, that really created an opening that I could bookmark. It helped to have somebody supportive and also helped to have Brad on board, right? Somebody to bounce ideas off of. Because when you're really doing new stuff, mantra number two, be prepared for people to not like it, right? And sometimes it's because it's a bad idea. Don't flatter yourself, okay? But sometimes it's just because the timing's not right, all right? And what was clear to me, and Brad sort of reinforced this, was that at that rural tourism studio, that wasn't the time, right? But it was still a good idea. So, just be patient sometimes with these ideas. Things went very quiet over the next year. Meanwhile, all around us, Nevada, Idaho, Utah, they were doing a lot of dark sky work. And we're doing a session tomorrow. If you want to learn more about this Outback Dark Sky project, go deep for an hour. We're going to do that tomorrow afternoon because there's a lot to say. There's a lot going on in Oregon now with dark sky tourism, but we're not late in a bad way, but we're, other states are much further along in the dark sky work. And so mantra number three, right? Know when to be patient. But then the corollary of that is you got to know when to put on the gas, all right? So while you're sitting there being patient doesn't mean your foot's not ready to hit the gas when it's time. And you need to know what that means because there's going to be a moment of opportunity when people are ready to engage with you and you need to be ready, right? You can't make that opening. And so working in with Jessica and checking in, because I would go over to Lake County a lot, which for me is 3 hours before I even see anybody in Lake County, just to get there, all right? And fun fact, this is your trivia fact, if Manhattan Island had the population density of Lake County, Oregon, there would be 20 people on the island, okay? So everybody matters that you meet out there, because guess what? It's a really small group of people, all right? And so let me get on track here. And worked with Jessica, kept in touch, but then it became clear 2 years later on March 13th, 2020, which was, as you all recall, lockdown day. It was my last public meeting at the BLM office at the Lakeview District in Lakeview, where we had brought together a group of land managers, ranchers, community members, and just to put some more cards on the table and gauge support for maybe proceeding with a conversation about a nomination of a dark sky place out in the Outback. And it turns out that there was support for that with a bunch of caveats and some real legit concerns. But now it was time to step on the gas, all right? This didn't exist, but I called Carly Kerner in Ashland, and 3 days later, we were a network of people. Okay, you don't have to ask permission to do these things sometimes, okay? And so I approved that because we needed it. We needed an umbrella to be under together. And so creating that sense of purpose, collaboration, and direction was really important to capture the energy of the people in the room. And then it was also important to give it some language. And again, I just, borrowed and improvised a little bit, but it was really important based on the sense of the room that I had. And it's this, the one-sentence version of the Outback Dark Sky Network. The network is a voluntary grassroots initiative to build an alliance of communities, businesses, local governments, ranchers, state and federal agencies, tribes, and Oregon Outback night sky enthusiasts to support a set of shared principles resulting in mutual community benefits and the long-term conservation of our starry night heritage. Notice the words voluntary, initiative, shared principles, all in support of that most important part, our starry night heritage. Because there's only 7,000 people who live in Lake County. And if they don't think it's their heritage, go home, because it's not going to work. All right, and people love where they live. This is mantra number 4. They love where they live, and they live there for a reason. All right, you can't go in and start changing what it is. You need to recognize what it is. And so that shared starry night heritage is still one of the most important ideas as we do this work in the midst of what is in many ways a giant conservation project, laying the groundwork for an 11 million acre dark sky sanctuary, which would be by far the largest in the world and the darkest in the US, and we're still working on it, so all right, this is work in progress. But to do that without the support of the people who live there, and who have lived there for millennia, and the people who manage those public lands in this vast reservoir of darkness, without right up front valuing that shared starry night heritage that connects us back in time and forward in time, we would just have hit brick wall after brick wall going forward. Because if anyone who lives out there, the last thing people want is someone coming from Ashland with a big idea, right? That's going to all of a sudden change their world, right? But honestly, the concerns that came up were totally legit concerns. Public land managers had real concerns about how they do their jobs that we absolutely needed to hear and make the project better. And it brings me to close out with my earlier allusion to the session talking about the M in many of our organization titles. Because when it comes to these new innovative projects, your job is not what you think it is. Okay, your job is much bigger than you think it is. And I never thought I'd be managing 3 sky quality meter data collection sites, right? With the Fish and Wildlife Service, with the U.S. Forest Service, at the Playa Arts Residency Program, uploading data to the IDA's database, with special use permits that are usually for wildlife biologists, all right? But that's what it takes, and that's what I'm doing, and I love it. But if you'd asked me, I thought I was doing that, I didn't know. Turns out that was the job. And then finally, each of you, your job is much more creative than you think it is. And so I love that we had that, closed that session with spoken word creativity, because that power to investigate words and to imagine, if you can't imagine it, how is anyone else going to imagine it? How are you going to talk about it if you don't even know what's in your head? So surround your people, make those partnerships to help make that happen. And keep at it and connect with the right people, and you'll get it done. So stay tuned and come learn more tomorrow if you want to.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's transportation. So before I get into it, I'm very curious, how many in the room have ever been to the Columbia River Gorge? I'm doing my job, yay. All right, so how many, if you've been to the gorge, have you ever gone to visit Multnomah Falls, Lateral Falls, Angel's Rest, etc.? Raise your hands. Waterfall Court. Oh, great. So how many of you who have done that have been stuck in traffic, couldn't find parking, probably screaming in your head out loud, why am I here? What is going on? I'm so angry. All right, some more hands. Yeah. Good news, we understand. We know that this is a big issue, and we are making steps forward and progress little by little to change the experience on the left-hand side here of traffic to the right-hand side of car-free transportation, shuttle systems, less stress out on that waterfall corridor of the historic highway. So before I get into it, my name is Lizzie Keenan. I am the regional lead, woohoo, thank you, Annie, regional lead for the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge Regional Tourism Alliance, also known as the Hood Gorge RDMO. What I'm going to talk about is transportation innovation in this waterfall corridor. Unlike some of my colleagues here, this is not work that I am leading. I am merely a partner in a very big group of partnerships. There's agencies, there's tourism people, there's transportation providers, we've got a network, we've got nonprofits, Forest Service, state parks. We have a lot of people doing really good work, but it could not be accomplished with one single person. It cannot be accomplished with just tourism, but without us, it would be really difficult. So first off, in case you didn't know, Multnomah Falls is Oregon's top natural visited site in the state. This waterfall corridor area receives over 2.5 million visitors each year. This congestion issue, I mean, it's grown increasingly every year, but really for the past 7 or 8 years, it's gotten worse and worse. So what used to just be a high summer season became summer plus every weekend was busy. And now we're at a point that anytime the sun shines brightly, just for a moment, it's packed, there's traffic, it's a huge problem year round. And COVID was a huge part of making that congestion even worse. So what you will experience if you come out today, or you have in the last year or so, is illegal parking up and down the streets, RVs trying to do U-turns on narrow historic cliffside roads, people walking along the highway, diving in and out of parked cars, moving cars, tickets, there's break-ins to cars, you can't find parking. This has resulted in extreme safety issues. Emergency vehicles can't get through this traffic. It's a historic highway, it is very narrow, so if there's traffic on it, there's no way for them to get through and help you out if you got hurt on a trail. Or there's also communities that actually live in this corridor. They also deserve safe and quick emergency response, and we can't get it out to them yet. But the future, and it's already the present, and we're getting there, is an experience of less traffic on the freeway and more use of shared car experiences, so shuttle systems, easier access for pedestrians and bikers to come in, better experience for residents in the area and the surrounding areas, better experiences for the visitors, and better experiences for the land itself. But this is not easy work. We don't have a comparable example in Oregon to follow for this, to figure out how to move people through what is one of Oregon's, if not Oregon's, most beautiful places in the state. We want people to see it. It is meant to be scenic. Okay, the coast is beautiful. But the best examples out there are national parks in other states. National parks have very different structures, funding structures. They do have single entities that can manage the flow of visitors, and we don't have that ability in our area. So we had to figure out, how can we do this as a group? So I'm going to talk about partnerships, as a lot of my colleagues already have, and what we're doing to help get people to visit during off-peak times and to flatten out that visitation. Maybe get them to plan in advance. Oh, that's a big goal. Get people comfortable with the idea of getting out of their own car and jumping onto a shuttle, which there isn't a lot of that yet in Oregon, but you do have that at national parks. You have that in other countries. We can do that here in Oregon as well. And so a lot of this work, I mean, we've been having discussions about this work for many years, as I mentioned, and a lot of the times it all felt way too daunting, way too big. A lot of the agency response was like, good luck with that. But then, thankfully, because of all of the conversations we had been having, ODOT did a congestion mitigation study on the historic highway corridor area. There was a lot of planning out of that work. It came out in July of 2019. We were all excited. There were short, medium, long-term plans in there of how we can start making changes in this area. So we started to talk about the long-term planning, and then COVID hits. We were like, oh God, what do we do? Well, thankfully, the land managers got together and actually just shut down the gorge for many months because they knew everybody was going to want to get outside. So we, instead of evacuating people, we just didn't let them in. But we took that time to realize we need to do this now. We can't wait any longer. We need to start activating a lot of these medium and long-term plans immediately. So as soon as the gorge reopened to visitors, especially this historic highway section, they came in. What we thought was going to happen, happened. They all rushed in, and so we started to take action. So just a couple of projects that have happened, and to kind of describe what the partnerships have looked like. Some of these were a little bit pre-COVID. Gorge Translink, the Translink link, Mckenzie, which is our economic development district in the gorge, pulled all the public transportation providers in Oregon and Washington together, aligned timing, aligned pickup locations, and made a tool for residents and visitors to use where you can connect to every transportation provider to get you in and around the gorge without the need for a car. And then they thought, wait, well, this is kind of complicated to have 5 different tickets for 5 different transportation providers, and how do you figure that out? Well, there's an answer. We have a pass, a gorge pass. One pass is all you need, and every transportation provider will see it and say, yes, come on board. It's not complicated. This is easy. But this is bi-state work that's happening. We need a bi-state agency that can help manage this, because these were all, a couple transportation providers on Washington side, a couple on the Oregon side. So we had out of the Gorge Tourism Studio, which happened in 2015, I believe, came CGTA. So that is the Gorge's tourism network. They are by state network. They were able to take the lead in helping to create the pass, market, and sell the pass. So that's a way that tourism was able to step in and help agencies and big transportation providers do something that they couldn't do for themselves, but as a group that they could help with. So then comes the summer of 2021. The impact is hitting from COVID. Things are a mess. We need to do the work. Multnomah Falls, Forest Service and ODOT come together, and they get a permit system started at Multnomah Falls for that 84 parking lot. So if you've ever tried to get in that parking lot, yeah, I see the shaking heads. It's awful. Exit 31, so they made a timed entry permit access just for Multnomah Falls to help, again, manage the flow of people just into that one spot in the corridor. It helped, as did Forest Service was able to step in and pay for a flagger on the historic highway in front of Multnomah Falls. Those 2 key pieces helped tourism enter this space and hit one of those medium-term goals that was in the congestion mitigation study of hop-on, hop-off shuttles. So because of all the traffic, we've never been able to get shuttle systems to help the system because they couldn't keep on top of timing because they would get stuck in traffic like everybody else. But with a flagger at Multnomah Falls, things were moving again, so they could do that. So we had 2 hop-on, hop-off shuttles. One of them had never worked in tourism before, knew to reach out to ODOT, got the information. ODOT stepped up and was like, we're gonna help you guys set up a space where you can pull over, let people on and let people off, because this is important to us as well. So Sasquatch Shuttle was one. Again, they'd never worked in tourism before, but I've worked with ODOT. So ODOT set them up and then they said, call Lizzie, she'll help you figure out how to make this work. I got them connected to Travel Oregon. They were on Otis. They joined the ad network. We were putting them into our PR and marketing channels and got them invested into this group of people here in a way they'd never had before. Then we have another shuttle provider in the room, Gray Line. They came to me, and this is something they've wanted to do, a hop-on, hop-off shuttle in this area for a while. But they needed additional capital to kick it off. And I was like, oh, I just heard about Destination Ready, Travel Oregon's investment program. For-profits can't apply, but RDMOs can. So we became a fiscal agent for them. We were awarded, we got them the money. They were so successful that this year they are expanding service to pickups in Portland. They've got additional vehicles going on. They're already receiving reservations for this coming summer, because people are planning in advance. It's all working. And so then one of the last big things that you may or may not have heard about yet is, this is the big one, and it's kind of scary, but it is a huge change for us, and we're very, very excited, is timed entry permit system is coming to actually get on this section of the historic highway. So to drive on the historic highway, I believe now it's gonna be from Bridal Veil Falls to Ainsworth Falls. You need to go online and make a reservation if you want to go out there in your own car. Or you don't want to worry about your own reservation, get on a shuttle. We've got hop-on, hop-off shuttles. We've got public transportation shuttles. You can go in there. Some of them have access. You can bring a bike with you. There's a lot of ways to access this area now, but in a more managed and functional way. So the roads are going to be clearer, parking's going to be easier, things are going to be less stressful, and we're very excited. However, the education on this is very difficult. So when I first heard about this permit system from ODOT, I was like, oh, hello. Tourism's going to need to step in and help. Please let us help. They were like, yes, great. We need all the help we can get. I think their marketing budget for this was $5,000. I was like, okay. So I called Travel Oregon. I'm like, hey guys, we need your help again. So we've gotten involved. Travel Oregon's gotten involved. Travel Portland's gotten involved. They have helped because a lot of operators that operate in the gorge are based in Portland. They've gotten them together to get them trained up, because that's the other thing. If you're a tour operator, you don't need a reservation system. So there's many ways to get in somebody else's vehicle and not have to worry about a reservation. So yeah, this launches in May, this new permit system at the end of May, and it'll run through September. We anticipate it's gonna be messy and confusing, but I'm hoping you as ambassadors in Oregon can help communicate it for us. We're gonna get more and more information out there as it gets finalized. But it's just a really exciting step forward in being creative, working with a bunch of different partners to have pretty impactful change in how we offer up tourism experiences in the state. So my two key takeaways is, this is not a Tom Cruise movie. Mission is possible. Just takes a little time. Maybe you need the series of multiple Mission Impossible movies. And then the second is, don't overlook the value that you have as an entity in tourism. Whether you're an RDMO, a DMO, a tour operator, anything in between, we have a special sauce to bring to the table. We have something that somebody else can't do as well. In this case, ODOT, maybe not the best user experience communicator, but they can manage the system. So that's where we found the way to step in and help. People love to get help offered to them when it's something that they know they can't do. So yeah, I think that is it, and thank you very much.
Hello again. I don't think I have to dive into regenerative travel too much because I think we got a good definition of that if you were in the keynote. But what I will talk about in a little more depth is the Mckenzie River project that we put together last year, which was a pretty awesome project made possible in large part by Travel Oregon's Destination Ready grant, which you've heard that theme here a couple times now. Essentially what we were doing in 2020, like I said in my speech earlier, was looking at new ways to look at tourism at a larger scale, looking at why we were doing it a little bit harder than just, the money aspect of it. And I'm a big believer in synchronicity. Things really fell into place for us immediately after kind of taking that initial step to research regenerative travel a little bit and reach out to some potential partners. Willamette Valley reached out, Tori was with them at the time, and talked about the Destination Ready grant and said, hey, we want to partner with you on this. We had already been talking with Global Family Travel, who is traditionally an outbound only international tour operator, but like all of them that were US based couldn't do international travel for 2020. So we were looking to develop new product, which is another one of our pivots in 2020, helping these international only outbound tour operators find product in the United States that they could sell to their constituents, to their audiences, so that they didn't have to just make no money at all. So Willamette Valley reached out. We were already working on a project in Washington, out on the Olympic Peninsula, collaborating with the Jamestown Sklallam tribe to do an immersive cultural experience combined with a nonprofit element that involves salmon habitat restoration and some really awesome recreational opportunities too out there, hiking and biking on the peninsula. And the recipe here, I think you'll kind of see starting to emerge from the people that talked before me, but it's all about collaboration. It's all about increasing that connectivity between different segments of our industry, and sometimes not even in our industry. One of the key components that really made regenerative travel happen in the projects that we've put together is having a nonprofit to work with. A lot of the areas that we've been recreating with for years are the same areas that nonprofits are doing this kind of restoration work. They're doing work in the communities, or they're doing work in the natural environment. And, thinking about ways to engage with those nonprofits opens up all kinds of doors. It opens up access to funding, which is the obvious one. We wouldn't have been able to do this without Cascade Volunteers, who Willamette Valley had already identified as a good partner for that Mckenzie River project. And we wouldn't have been able to actually access the public lands to do the work that we were doing on. As a tour operator, if there's anyone else in the room that's a tour operator, I know Dan's in here, what permitting is like. It's a lot easier in Eastern Oregon where there's not as many people competing for them, but it is one of the biggest roadblocks to working in the kind of places that we want to take people to is permitting for public lands. Well, this is a really interesting way to get people out onto public lands as part of a tour that you wouldn't have access to otherwise, and do good work while you're doing it. Looking for those nonprofits out there that are doing this kind of work, I think is a really important part of this process, because you might be surprised how many of them are that are looking for partnership opportunities. I think one of the biggest takeaways from what I learned personally in doing these last year, because it was such an unpredictable year, we yo-yoed back and forth with what we could do with COVID regulations, group sizes, all those things on and off. We did have to cancel and postpone one of the tours that we had already scheduled, and we also were able to use one of them in a really innovative way as a learning opportunity, so we could share this recipe that we came up with in collaboration with other tourism industry professionals. That was an awesome pivot. Also, I'm just going to keep saying it because it is a cool word and it's appropriate. So, coming up with that recipe, of collaboration, like how, who's out there in this tourism landscape that you can partner with to create new product and to create innovation and to do the kind of positive impact work that we're talking about now with regenerative travel. Regenerative agriculture is a big one. Willamette Valley, they've got tons of biodynamic wineries. I think Oregon's got to have more than almost anywhere else in the world. I mean, biodynamic is huge here. We have our own certification process for being sustainable in the winery industry. That's regenerative agriculture. It's been being done. Now it's being called something different, but it's still something you can partner with and talk about and educate people about that maybe you're not including in your tour product. And I think getting corporate engagement with this kind of thing as well, once you get this recipe put together and you create some new product, trying to find companies that are interested in hitting the metrics of sustainability and DEI work and all of the things that are impactful in a positive way, all those feel-good, touch points that we all are looking for in this, hopefully post-pandemic world. Finding corporate sponsorship or corporate engagement is a really good way to start making these things actually profitable as well. Because First Nature, I started because I wanted to do on-demand travel. I'll be really honest about the fact that I don't like doing set departures. I learned from many different companies I worked for over 15 years that it's a really hard thing to fill seats and it's stressful. So, we had to set these up as set departures just according to the structure of the grant and according to the partnership that we had with Cascade Volunteers. But being able to have something like this ready to go for a corporate offsite, for a meeting or some kind of an event that you get a request for in your destination that hey, you want to come and have an offsite meeting? Cool, let's do some volunteer work as a part of it. Let's go out and clean up a river. Let's go out and plant trees like what we did on this one. That's actually from the first of the regenerative tours that we did last year in the Mckenzie River. That photo, and we got a ton of great footage, thanks also to Travel Oregon for sending a photojournalist to capture all kinds of awesome stuff. I think this photo is actually in one of Travel Oregon's marketing packets for something too. So, having the DMO there supporting this kind of work with a grant and helping to offset the costs, because this isn't a money-making opportunity for us right now. This is just a storytelling opportunity, an opportunity to do really good work that is rewarding in ways other than financially. But it will be at some point, I hope, and it will become more common and more easily accessed, hopefully, if we keep telling the stories that we're telling about these kind of projects and about how collaboration can help us all come back from tragedy, from things like the 2020 wildfires, from things like the pandemic. Because everywhere in the world is suffering. Everywhere has these opportunities and these needs. And it's just a matter about talking to the right people to connect for the opportunities to actually bloom. I don't want to take up too much more time because I know we only have a little bit left for Q&A, right? So that's the part that I'm excited about because I don't like talking at people. I'd rather talk to you. So yeah, I don't know how you want to do the Q&A. You want to go for it?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. If you're like me, I was thinking back on the last 2 years and all of the things that were happening and changing so quickly around us, and wildfires and George Floyd and days spent in the fetal position on the floor and not sure what the next steps were going to be. So thank you again for sharing your incredibly inspiring and innovative ideas with us. And hopefully you all are also feeling encouraged to go back and start these programs, find the right partnerships. I loved hearing that a lot of these didn't even have necessarily a basis to start from or funding or a place to go, but you just went. So thank you. Thank you again for sharing that with us. So we do have a couple of minutes to do some Q&A. If anyone has questions, go ahead and just say them out loud and I'll repeat them back in the microphone for our friends that are streaming online. And the panel will answer. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, please, Thelma.
This is basically for the Columbia Gorge.
Yeah.
I came over today, or when I came over to the conference, with the people that work at the welcome centers, and we came up 84. One of the things that I've noticed, and they noticed, is the fact that on both sides of the river, we have railroad tracks. Has the railroad companies been involved in the conversations?
So the question was if the railroad tracks on either side of the Columbia Gorge are being utilized in some of the transportation projects that they're doing. Lizzie. think you're good.
No. I mean, yes and no. I don't have, I'm not the best person to fully respond to that, but I believe the ownership on the Oregon side of the railroad tracks is all, it's like Union Pacific. Yeah. And so David Duncan has the answer.
Oh,
Perfect.
Sorry, Lizzie.
No, thank you, David.
Okay, I've been involved in the tour business since 1984, and the first 20 years was in the rail side. Burlington Northern Santa Fe owns the tracks on the north side of the river, Union Pacific on the south side. They are very freight-oriented. They have between 60 and 80 freight trains a day over that line. Amtrak has one train through each way on the north side. And so it's a capacity issue. Because the Columbia River Gorge is a national scenic area, they're no longer allowed to expand their capacity with additional sidings. So in answer to all of that, they are not only reluctant, but basically will say no to any kind of additional passenger train service because they just are stretched to the limit for the capacity that they currently have to work with.
makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Harry. Do you have a question?
I was just think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Karen.
Is it on? Okay. Hey, yeah. I was general question to all the panelists, and by the way, awesome stuff. Really stoked to see all this stuff come to fruition. But if you ran into opposition along the way, how did you deal with it, and how did you, incorporate their perspectives? No one in particular.
Is this on? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're still developing our plan, but we certainly, when we first started talking about it, we did have some people that said, like, why are you guys doing this? Why do you need to be doing this? How come you didn't tell me about this before you started doing this? And so I think when of course, if I get that kind of response, then we had conversations. And a lot of times the conversation was, hey, we're not against the work at all. We just wish we would have known about it before you started doing it. I think in the case of the climate change work, it's a little bit upside down from how we usually do our work, because instead of doing a couple of years of conversations, unfortunately the climate change issue is urgent. So what we actually had to start by saying, what can our organization, a nonprofit of currently 4 people, what could we actually offer? What could our plan look like? Because when we did, when you have conversations and presentations, one person might say, hey, you should work on getting paper straws in every single restaurant. Someone else might say, hey, we should have a countywide composter for every county on the coast. Someone else says, hey, let's get dogs to stop chasing seagulls. Let's get the trash off the beaches. Let's invest in wash ashore. And so climate change is a huge topic, and there's a million ways to work on it. And so our team said, hey, let's start by saying, what are sort of the pathways that we want to focus on? What are some of the topics we want to start with? And so we have a draft plan right now that we're just sort of modifying, and then we're going to go back out to communities and get especially private sector input on what are some of the gaps and the needs to go with it. But I think the opposition that we saw a lot was just people saying, I just need to know more information, and I need to know the why of why you're doing this. And after we talked it through, they were like, okay, sounds good.
So for the work that we're doing in the Valley, I say the opposition that we faced was more fear-based and not knowing where to begin. It's something that we still tackle and will continue to, but some of the questions that come up are, is it tourism's lane? Is this something that we need? When we talk about frontline staff training, I know many of you have heard this quote before, is when you have someone in a hotel ask a same-sex couple 3 or 4 times if they're sure they want a king-size bed. That's why we're doing the work that we're doing. That's why we're in this space now. That's why it's important for tourism. The other component that we have to remember is, as marketers, as salespeople, as community members, as tourism industry professionals, we were all at a loss. Do I just change my marketing? Do I automatically add tribal entities or tribal members? How do I diversify without tokenizing? Who do I talk to? And so again, like I said when I opened up, having that safe space to say, this is my challenge, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, I don't want to be judged. What ad do I put in this magazine? Having that open communication is where we've met that challenge with resource that we've been able to, again, crowdfund, establish to continue the work.
I'm not sure that we had opposition. We were going slow enough that it was really more of a feedback process, but it was all totally legit. Everything that came up in that process, concerns of land managers about leases that they have with grazing and that kind of, what kind of impact on a real level is it going to have if they sign on an MOU to support a dark sky sanctuary? What are the real applications? What are they really committing to? And it was really just, they just wanted to know. The fact that private landholders, it's a voluntary process to, nobody's, when people heard they weren't going to jail for putting a barn light up, that helped, right? And so, but it was that idea. And I will say that the opposition and the time we've taken to get the feedback, is there anyone from the IDA in the room right now, the International Dark Sky Association? Good. Because I think what's going to happen is that because this is a lived-in environment, what we're putting in front of them, and I think we should be proud as Oregonians to do these kinds of things, is this is a lived-in environment. And it's not like an island in the middle of the Pacific. And so a lot of the criteria that this third-party nonprofit group, they work really hard to conserve night skies. But they're not used to necessarily multi-agency MOUs and lived-in environments. And when you see the light maps at the session tomorrow, you'll see it still is the darkest place in America, even with the people there. So we need to work with people, not exclude them. And so in that sense, the opposition hasn't been opposition, it's been necessary feedback, and I actually think IDA is going to change because of it.
Awesome. So
You might.
Do you need a lifeline?
There we go. Yeah.
let's try this one. So what's interesting is we've had opposition on both ends, and I think that's what's instigated a lot of the work. So there were local residents complaining about all of the traffic issues on the waterfall corridor and how much of a problem it was. So now steps are being taken to change that. But then there's more feedback, but similar to what Bob was saying, it's good feedback. And so thankfully ODOT does most of this work, but they are working with local residents and figuring out how to make the system work for them. And there's even some businesses in that area. How does it work for them? And making those accommodations while still moving big change forward. The other thing I would mention is, I don't know how much tourism therapy you guys have had with your partners over the last couple of years, but having so many different partnerships involved in all of this work, I think one of the big things that's been important for us is there's been a lot of setbacks in us trying to move this work forward. Things don't always go the way you want them to go, but there's always somebody who's in this with you to step up and say, don't worry about it. We can figure out another way to do this. Let's rejigger this. And so nobody really feels alone in doing this work in the gorge. And I think that has been really powerful for us.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the short answer is no, because people are pretty on board with the kind of the work that we're doing with regenerative travel. But we did have some questions as well regarding replanting in wildfire areas with the project in the Mckenzie River. That's kind of like a hot topic, and somewhat debated. But I think that what we did right, and the way to do this right, and the big takeaway about working with a community that has suffered some kind of tragedy like they did in the Mckenzie River corridor, is to have it be community-led. I mean, volunteerism is a word we don't use anymore for a reason. It got a bad name from people going and, thinking they could do things better for the people that live in a certain place and having that savior mentality without really listening to the people in that destination. And so to really do regenerative travel well and to create these kind of projects effectively and to make them long-lasting is listening to the people in the community and what the needs are, see what the needs are in the community, and have it be community-led from the get-go. Because then you avoid having people come out there and say, what are you doing in my backyard? And, why didn't I know about it, for instance? So, yeah, I would say that's like the biggest takeaway for me that I want people to know about regenerative travel and like this kind of volunteering incorporated into tourism is, you know, it has to be from the community first and foremost.
Yeah, that's a great point. We have reached our 12 o'clock hour, so I apologize. I know there's additional questions. I'm going to welcome everyone to connect with our speakers to her at the conference for the rest of the time here. So please network not only with the people around you, but with these folks if you have more questions and ideas. Once again, thank you so much for sharing today.